3 of Chief Wahoo McDaniel. Probably no one in the history of professional wrestling had a career like Chief Wahoo McDaniel. He started out at top, he ended up at the top. In professional wrestling, we have looked at part 1 and 2. We looked at it. I think now we're at what year are we in right now?
1970.
1970. Now, this is not every match that Chief Wahoo McDaniel had. He had many matches. He wrestled 7 days a week. But this is just the highlights of what he did in 1970 and 1971. Jack?
March the 3rd, 1970, at the Sportatorium in Dallas, Texas. Dory Funk Jr. versus Wahoo McDaniel. The match ended without a winner as a time limit draw in 1 hour, and it was for the NWA World Heavyweight title, 2 out of 3 falls match. And then on March the 4th, Municipal Auditorium in San Antonio, Texas, Johnny Valentine and Killer Carl Cox defeated Wahoo McDaniel and Emile Dupree. March the 6th, 1970, at the Sam Houston Coliseum in Houston, Texas. Dory Funk Jr., the champion, versus Wahoo McDaniel, ended without a winner in another time limit draw, 1 hour and 30 minutes, in a 2 out of 3 falls match. Wow. March the 14th, 1970, Municipal Auditorium again in San Antonio, Texas. Johnny Valentine and Killer Carl Cox defeated Mil Mascaras and Wahoo McDaniel by disqualification. April the 8th, 1970, Municipal Auditorium in San Antonio, Great Malenko versus Wahoo McDaniel, winner unknown, but that was a chain match. And then June the 5th, Sam Houston Coliseum, Wahoo McDaniel, Ernie Ladd, and Mil Mascaras defeated Boris Malenko, Killer Kowalski, and Johnny Valentine in a 2 out of 3 falls match. June the 23rd, 1970, Sportatorium in Dallas. Wahoo McDaniel defeated Bob Orton. Lost my list there. July the 3rd, 1970, Sam Houston Coliseum in Houston. Ernie Ladd and Wahoo McDaniel defeated Boris Malenko and Bob Orton in a 2 out of 3 falls match. And then September the 9th, 1970, Municipal Auditorium in San Antonio, Killer Carl Cox and Mike York, the champions, defeated Wahoo McDaniel and Mr. Wrestling to retain the NWA American Tag Team titles. And then October the 5th, 1970, Taylor County Coliseum in Abilene, Texas, Bull Ramos versus Wahoo McDaniel, winner unknown, in an Indian strap match. Flip the wrong page. Give me a second. All right. November the 12th, 1970, Taylor County Coliseum in Abilene, Texas, Pac Song versus Wahoo McDaniel, winner unknown. November the 30th, 1970, Sam Houston Coliseum again in Houston. Tora Tanaka versus Wahoo McDaniel ended without a winner as a double countout in a 2 out of 3 falls match. November the 2nd, 1970, Northside Coliseum in Fort Worth, Texas. Wahoo McDaniel and George Scott defeated Killer Kowalski and Tora Tanaka. November the 6th, 1970, Downtown Recreation Center in Houston, Texas. Wahoo McDaniel and Gentleman Ben, the Wrestling Bear, defeated Morris Malenko and Lord Charles Montague. November the 9th, 1970, Northside Coliseum again in Fort Worth. Wahoo McDaniel and Joe Blanchard defeated Killer Kowalski and Tora Tanaka. November the 30th, Northside Coliseum in Fort Worth, Texas. Killer Kowalski and Tora Tanaka defeated Fritz Von Erich and Wahoo McDaniel. At the Sportatorium in Dallas on December the 29th, Wahoo McDaniel defeated Jimmy Valiant.
Wow. Jimmy Valiant, 1970. Can you imagine?
By the way, while we're looking at this, here is Wahoo McDaniel with Paul Bosch, promoter Paul Bosch, on Houston Wrestling, that played in and probably one of the longest running wrestling programs at that time. Maybe WWE has beat it at this point. But at that time, it was a look at Wahoo McDaniel there. Paul Bosch probably talking about one of those matches that we were just talking about. Great picture. I wish there were more of these.
Yeah.
We come up at the we're on January the 18th, 1971, at the Round Building at the West Texas Fairgrounds. That would be the one next to the square one, the Round Building. And Abilene, Texas. Buck Roby defeated Wahoo McDaniels. Downtown Recreation Center, Houston, Texas, on February 12th, 1971. Wahoo McDaniels defeated Klondike Bill in a 2-out-of-3 fall match. Northside Coliseum, Fort Worth, Texas, February 15th, 1971. Wahoo McDaniels defeated Johnny Walker. Northside Coliseum, Fort Worth, Texas again. This is on May the 17th, 1971. It's Bronco Lubitsch and Chris Markoff defeating Wahoo McDaniels and Johnny Valentine. And that is a title change.
I wonder if Bronco was a little faster at that point.
May have actually went down for a false count every now and then.
That's possible. Sam Houston Coliseum, Houston, Texas, May 21st, 1971. It's Wahoo McDaniels defeating Terry Funk for the NWA American Heavyweight title, 2-out-of-3 fall match. Well, he was defending the championship there in that match. Sportatorium in Dallas, Texas on May 25th, 1971. Wahoo McDaniels defeated Skander Akbar. And then the Sam Houston Coliseum, May 29th, 1971, Johnny Valentine and Wahoo McDaniels defeated Dory Funk and Dory Funk Jr. in a 2-out-of-3 fall match. Then at a show in San Antonio, Texas on June the 5th, 1971, that is the Municipal Auditorium in San Antonio, Wahoo McDaniels defeated Pepper Gomez in a NWA American Heavyweight Championship match. Memorial Coliseum, Corpus Christi, Texas on June the 10th, 1971, Thunderbolt Patterson versus Wahoo McDaniel. That was for the American Heavyweight Championship. The winner was unknown in that one. Sam Houston Coliseum, Houston, Texas, on June the 18th, 1971, as Wahoo McDaniel defeated Gorgeous George Jr. in a 2-out-of-3 fall match. Northside Coliseum, Fort Worth, Texas, on August the 2nd, 1971, Wahoo McDaniel and Mil Mascaras defeated Bronco Lubitsch and Toro Tanaka. It's the Sam Houston Coliseum on August the 6th, 1971. Wahoo McDaniel and Cowboy Lang defeated Buddy Wolf and Lord Littlebrook. Killen, Texas on August the 7th, 1971. Wahoo McDaniel, Bobby Shane, and Tim Woods defeated Toro Tanaka, Bronco Lubitsch, and George Harris III. City Coliseum, Austin, Texas on October the 13th, 1971. Buddy Wolf and the Spoiler defeated Ernie Ladd and Wahoo McDaniels. Ector County Coliseum, Odessa, Texas, November the 16th, 1971. Wahoo McDaniel and Terry Funk defeating Harley Race and Pac Song in a 2-out-of-3 fall match. Municipal Auditorium, San Antonio, Texas again. It's November the 17th. I guess the very next night. Well, that's not the same place. It's Municipal Auditorium, San Antonio, Texas on November the 17th, 1971. It's El Santo, which we saw last week. We talked about Jody Hamilton. El Santo and Wahoo McDaniels defeating the Spoiler number 1 and Thunderbolt Patterson. It's the Sportatorium, Dallas, Texas on December the 7th, 1971. Dean Ho and Wahoo McDaniel defeated the Spoiler and Johnny Valentine. Wahoo would then make his way to Australia and wrestle for World Championship Wrestling in Jim Barnett from January until he makes his way to the AWA April of 1972.
Yes, he makes his way to Charlotte, where we know he gets in a big feud with the Johnny Valentine. What many people did not realize is this photograph right here. This match is Thunderbolt Patterson against Johnny Valentine, special guest referee Wahoo McDaniel. What many people, they know about the feud they had, but many might not have knew that they were tag team partners as well. And they went against Thunderbolt Patterson, and he was the bad guy in this situation, going against Johnny Valentine and Wahoo McDaniel. I guarantee they drew some good money with that. That was some great money. Also, while we're looking at this was a August 31st, 1971. Ed Watt was the matchmaker. This is Sportatorium in Dallas. As you see, Thunderbolt Patterson is going against Wahoo McDaniel. Well, it doesn't say that. It says next Tuesday, Ray Mendoza against Thunderbolt Patterson. You might as well. I wonder if they just went out there and said he wins the title that night. Ray Mendoza went against Bobby Shane. I think probably at that time he was the Boy Wonder, Bobby Shane. Here's another thing, February 13th, 2 main events plus 2 exciting matches. Chief Wahoo McDaniel against Toro Tanaka, which we talked about. No disqualification, tag match, Thunderbolt Patterson and Pepper Gomez against Joe Blanchard and Jimmy Valiant. That was in Keelan, Texas. And I believe that was one that you talked about, wasn't it, Rodney?
Yes.
Here's another program. This is from June 21st, I believe, 1971. Chief Wahoo McDaniel against Toro Tanaka. We see Johnny Valentine to unstrip Skandar Akbar in that one. We may have already showed this one. No, Saturday, October 30th, the NGC Gym thrill to the excitement and action of professional wrestling. Main event, Chief Wahoo McDaniel against Johnny Valentine, tag team match. Bobby Shane and Suba Singh, I believe that's how you'd say that, against the Spuller #1, which was the original Don Jardine was the against then two other and Bronco Lubitsch, two other matches. Here is another deal, All-Star Wrestling on Thursday, September the 20th. Crusher against Billy Graham. Wahoo McDaniel against Jimmy Valiant. This was one of the times he made his way, at that time, made his way over to, I believe that would have been AWA. It could have not been AWA. It might have been may have been the Crusher's territory. I'm not for sure. Here's another one. Fritz Teams with the Golden Boy. That's Chief Wahoo McDaniel on that. And that program there, the wrestler from Fort Worth, Texas. I think Thunderbolt Patterson.
That's the wrestler. That's the wrestler. Right
there. It is the wrestler. Yeah, it's the wrestler from Fort Worth. And that was November 1st, 1971. Von Erich and Wolf meet Valentine and Spuller. I'm not for sure who Chief Wahoo McDaniel was. T-Bolt to show Fritz what to expect later. I'm not for sure who Wahoo McDaniels was wrestling on that. Here's a nice photograph side view of Chief Wahoo McDaniel. I believe this one we may have already seen. No, there's the match with Pac Song against Wahoo, the Pro Football Gate, Mr. Wrestling, which was Tim Woods, and the Gladiator against Nick and Jerry Kozak, Salvador Domingo against Buck Robley. And here is Corpus Christi, Dory Funk Jr. against Pepper Gomez for the World Heavyweight Championship, Mr. Wrestling against Johnny Valentine. Mr. Wrestling without his mask. Well, he did that a lot, didn't he? No wonder Wrestling 2 wanted to beat him up in Georgia.
He might be like Spider-Man. He has to tell somebody so that he can get a date.
And there's the Indian strap match. Wahoo McDaniel against Toro Tanaka, plus 3 other great matches. Ringside 5, Dress Circle 4, Balcony 3, 1971. And it's just some Wahoo just had a storied career. We're going to look at when we look at him again, we're going to look at 1972 and probably 1973, maybe get into 1974. But he has a great run with Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling, and I think everybody will enjoy seeing that. And at some point, he makes his way to the American Wrestling Association as well. So very interesting matches coming up with Chief Wahoo McDaniel. Let's go see what some of the our insiders have got to say. Richard Hood said Pepper Gomez was famous for people standing on his stomach. Yeah, they did a lot of angles that way back in those days with him. And I always would hurt them. And they did almost this in every territory they ever did. Every territory everyone to, they did the same thing. If it worked, they made sure it worked back then. Richard Hood, Thunderbolt was one of the first black heels in the business.
Well, he was not completely original. You had Abdullah the Butcher that started in 1958, whereas Thunderbolt didn't start till 1964. So he predated him as far as one of the bigger known heels. And drew a lot of money in Canada in the beginning, drew a ton of money there. And then made his way to the United States, where he drew a lot of money. Michael Barr is having technical difficulties because of the storms in the area. We've not got the storms yet. I believe they're on their way. Have they gotten to Alabama, Jack? Yeah, they're down in South Alabama, but I think that they're going to shift as far as me. I should be getting some of the rain from it, but hopefully not the worst weather. Of course, I hope nobody gets it. I hope the thing just hits the coast and stops and just is done. But.
Yes, yeah. Michael B said, "Hello, I made it. Had to get a generator going. Man,
wow."
Let's see. Michael B. Chief Wahoo McDaniel was a great wrestler and a one of a kind as well, and a very nice man. He was a very nice person. Never took himself seriously. Now, he took professional wrestling seriously. If you were going to get in the ring with Wahoo, you were going to know you got in the ring with Wahoo McDaniel. There was no doubt you were going to get a chop, and you're going to feel it, and you're going to know it. And he didn't care if you gave it back to him. He was tough. If there was a word of someone being tough, Wahoo was tough. And you know what? There wasn't many people could do anything about it. One problem with people said he was another one of them who couldn't see. So when he gave you the chop, he either gave it to you in the nose, in the mouth. You know, you kind of had to make sure he got it, or you would get it anywhere. I don't know that he didn't like stand hands. He just used that. So he beat you up. He hit you hard, make everything look good. I mean, what do y'all think?
I am thoroughly convinced that Ric Flair stole his chop from Wahoo. I am thoroughly convinced that he stole it from him.
All right. Wahoo McDaniel goes against Johnny Walker on one part of this. And yes, for folks who are asking, yes, that is Mr. Wrestling 2. Way before, years before, I think he would not become Wrestling 2 until 1973. And Jerry Jarrett developed him and made him Wrestling 2.
And Ole.
And Ole.
They worked well.
And Bill Watts.
Bill Watts.
But that is, and you know, I don't think a lot of people realize that, you know, he was a very accomplished wrestler before he gets to become Wrestling 2. Now, Wrestling 2 makes him the name. As we see in this, he goes against Dory Funk Jr. What is very impressive is they go to the Sam Houston Coliseum in Houston, Texas on March 6th. And Jack was telling us 1 hour and 30 minutes. 1 hour and 30 minutes. I don't believe today you could go 1 hour and 30 minutes, but back in those days, you know, they had them people standing. What's your thoughts, Jack? 1 hour and 30-minute match.
I did an hour one time, and that was enough for me. I never wanted a piece of that ever again. Yeah, I mean, it was tough, but you know, there was also a time period when guys were expected to go 30, 45 minutes to an hour every night. So they were conditioned for it. We're not conditioned for that anymore, but they were.
We also, June 23rd, 1970, we saw Wahoo McDaniel defeat Bob Orton. And yes, that is Bob Orton Jr.'s father and grandfather to Randy Orton. You know, they had to have tremendous matches, and the Boris Malenko that is on this is the Boris Malenko that is part of Wrestling War of Knoxville. This was before, it wouldn't be too much longer before they would try to steal a territory, but I guess at the time he was not. Killer Carl Cox. I would have loved to see Killer Carl Cox against Wahoo. We eventually would see them in 1979 wrestling each other in Atlanta, but I would love to see them matches in 1970. Imagine how great those matches had to be. They had to be tremendous. One thing people need to realize too, Wahoo McDaniel started drawing money from the beginning, from the time he started. People had known him. He got a lot of press in the newspaper for playing football, because for the first couple of years he was playing football and wrestling on the off time, because back then I don't think football players were making any money. Mm-mm. I mean, I think they made more money wrestling. So Richard Hood said Wahoo hit Gene Anderson at one time and knocked out his teeth.
I wouldn't doubt it.
No, I would not. Michael said 1 hour and 30 minutes. That match would have to be good and not be boring.
To those of us who appreciate real professional wrestling, it would not have been boring. In today's society, they probably got booed out of the building, and that is probably one of the saddest commentaries about the state of our business that I know of today.
And that's the difference between being over and not being over.
Exactly.
People wanted to see, at that point, wanted to see Wahoo McDaniel win the title.
Yep.
And they were willing to stay with them the whole time and back them up. By the way, Pac Song against Wall and McDaniel, I would love to see that match in 1970 as well.
And we have to remember, Dory was undefeated. There was none of this in the 4 years he was champion, that there was any of this. He lost it one night and won it back the next night. There was none of that. He kept it for 4 years straight.
This guy that called Lord Charles Montagon, was that not the Gorgeous George wannabe guy?
I believe so.
That actually did the other Gorgeous George. He was the kind of the
Montague.
Montague. Yeah, I thought that was. And if we're not right, leave it in the message that we're not right. But Buck Robley, he would wrestle against him in that round building next to the square building, Rodney said.
That's right.
At the West Texas Fairground. Buck Robley would become.
And it predates the modern octagon. Because that's
yes.
That's true. But
just imagine we're going to the round building.
Buck Robley is the man that would book and do well with the Freebirds in Louisiana. Klondike Bill, Downtown Recreation Center in Houston, Texas. I wonder how big this place was. Because they would run there, and then they would also run the Sam Houston Coliseum. I don't know if they, I don't know if there was a rhyme or reason to them, or did they run them at the same time? I'm not for sure. But Klondike Bill would later put up the wrestling rings for World Championship Wrestling. Many times he would fall asleep at ringside while the match is going on.
Wasn't he the one that fall asleep sitting in the corner in a tag match?
He could have been. Tor Tanaka did the same thing. So
I was thinking about. I remember when somebody on this list was one that liked to stand in the corner and he's waiting for his tag. He'd fall asleep in the corner.
Tor Tanaka would do that, by the way. Dad said he had to wake him up one time, tell him it was time for him to come in.
You imagine?
Klondike Bill, though, I don't know how many times I'd have to hit him and tell him the match is over. He's gonna have to, and the referee would always say, "Ring the bell," and I'd look over, and he'd be.
When Bill Dundee was doing Sir William, he would hit him with the umbrella.
Just, did you ever meet Klondike Bill?
Yeah,
such a character, such a nice guy, such a character. Tell you some great stories.
The one story I know of him is I can't tell on the air. He was still a nice guy in the story, but the circumstances.
Is this the one that happened in Chattanooga?
It involved a hotel room and a young lady. Yeah.
We'll have to tell that story when we're not doing these videos that we're doing them now. We changed it up a little bit, so these are actually every bit of it is being played on there to actually. And if people want to know why that is going on, insiders like to know because coming up on October 8th, when we do our live show, it will be recorded, and those shows will have to be edited. So to take a little bit of time away, that we can do editing on those shows to be able to play them on our YouTube channel. So by the way, for those of you who are going to come live, don't worry, it's going to take you a couple of months for them to actually get on the air. So it may be a couple of don't let that deter you from coming to our wrestling shows, because it'll take you a long time to get to see those, because I am going to be the only one that edit them, and they may take some time. It may take time to edit those shows together. Let's see. There's something else I wanted to talk about on here. Chris Markoff was a tremendous wrestler. I was looking at these matches with Terry Funk and Wahoo. Can you imagine their matches were good in the end of the 1970s? How well these matches were in 1970, 71. They had to be in some incredible matches. Michael B. I cannot imagine falling asleep as a tag team partner wrestling match. I just know Tor Tanaka would do it all the time. Dad had to go back and hit him and say, "Time."
I just sitting there snoring in the corner. That's something. There was some wrestlers that would also take, let's just say, human excrement and put it underneath their arms and grab a headlock too. Watch them to fight to get out of that.
For people who would like to know, and we'll go ahead and say the Fargos started that tradition. Jackie Darn, and I don't know the Roughhouse did that.
Oh, I'd have been throwing up.
Oh, I would have been.
I've been sick.
So I missed two of his questions. Let's see.
He was asking about Randy Orton Jr., I think.
Oh, Randy Orton. Okay. Randy Orton, what do we think of Randy? I think Randy's great. I think he's being utilized so bad and turned so many times. I don't think people care. And it's not his fault.
Yeah. As far as talent-wise, I think Randy's one of those few guys that could have survived in any era. I mean, he's just a superb athlete and probably one of the last true workers in the industry.
Let's see. I don't see. Rodney, what do you think about Randy Orton while I'm looking?
I've been liking what they've been doing here lately with him. And he's pretty decent. He and McIntyre. It got monotonous for me when I was watching that, but the new stuff with him and the Riddler, pretty good.
Yeah.
I don't see that. I don't see the other thing I missed. Go ahead and put it together. It must not have came in.
You're saying that the Ditz is now standing on both feet.
Oh, okay. I got that.
Oh, the mitts. Did I say Ditz? I meant mitts.
Yeah, but you meant Ditz.
I liked it when Wahoo turned and it was so well done when he turns on Ron Garvin. It was tremendous the way he did it, and really, I don't know that I blame Wahoo for turning. Yeah. When they did it, it made sense of why.
Well, honestly, the best heels are ones who feel like they are justified in being the way they are.
Yeah. And that's the way you should be. You should think what you're doing is nothing wrong with it, no matter what you did. There's nothing wrong with what you did. You were doing the best, and if you did something wrong, you're going to lie out of it and say, "I never did it. That was somebody else." That's where they got that song
right.
with me. Rick Brooks. I can't get in today's wrestling. Too many small guys that look like they're from the local high school. Some are. But some of the greatest wrestlers were smaller wrestlers, though. Ricky Morton was not a big man, but was one of the best wrestlers that ever put on a pair of tights. Now, and that's no lie. He was one of the best. He could do it all. He could sell. He could come back. He could do the interview. He was so good at what he did. Danny Davis, tremendous wrestler, was a smaller wrestler, but man, he could go out there and go. Kenny Wayne. Yep. We may not like him on a personal level, but he could get out there and wrestle. There's no doubt. He was a smaller guy. There's so many other ones that were smaller. Kenny Lucas was not a big man, but what a wrestler he was.
I think the biggest issue of the small guys nowadays is that there's so many of them.
That's true.
I mean, it seems like 3/4 of the roster, are 200 pounds or lighter.
What did he say? What did you can call me Bar? He said, "I can call me Bar by my last name." That you do
no, by golly, you put B. We're calling you B, BB.
That's right. That's right. He also said, "How many heavyweight wrestlers could sell?" Well, Jim Duggan could sell. He was good at selling. Punches look horrible when he made his comeback, but everything else looked pretty good.
No better than Johnny Valentine. I mean, you talk about somebody that could sell. That man could really do a great job. I mean, fantastic.
Ole Anderson could.
Yeah. Bill Eadie, I thought was great.
Yeah, so there was a lot of great a big man. Ernie Ladd. I always liked Ernie Ladd. He could get hit in the stomach and he'd still grab a hold of his But I always loved Ernie Ladd. We'd always say that. Look at that. He's gotten hit in the stomach. He's grabbing a hold of.
Grab his ear. Grab his ear.
You know, Ernie knew how to control the people. You know, and I always liked him.
Big guys may not have sold as much as smaller guys, but they're selling meant more. I think in a lot of ways because you just it's the mindset you had. When a big guy finally starts selling, there's a chance he's going to get beat.
You know what's so incredible about Tommy Rich? Tommy Rich at the beginning was about 220 to 240 pounds.
Yep.
He lost a lot of weight in Georgia when he got to Georgia. So when he first got to Georgia, he wasn't. But by the time 1980 come along, he was pretty slim. And then by 1980 something, he was.
Can you imagine how great Tommy would have been if he had gone to the gym instead of waiting till 1993?
I know. Oh yeah.
There was that brief time period in WCW where they told him, you get in the gym, get your physique worked on, or you're gone. And he had a great looking body on him there for a while. And then when they turned him heel, he just quit. Because his words to me were, well, they don't care if you're fat when you're a heel. Well, obviously they did because they fired him. But that's just me.
And this is the thing about Tommy. He could have drew them a lot of money. When Ole and our father Ronnie West was there, and they're the ones that was going to push him. They were going to push him to the top again. That was their whole thought process. But Ole quits. Dusty Rhodes, I believe, takes over from there, and Dusty did not like Tommy Rich. So and I know this because I tried to get Tommy Rich booked for a couple of shows, and he said, "No, babies, I don't think we're gonna do that. I don't think we bring Tommy and Rich in." And I said, "Well, I'm telling you, he'll draw in Cleveland." I said, "Put him in Cleveland. He'll draw that one house. I'm telling you, he's gonna draw for you." No, babies, that's not gonna happen. The dream not gonna bring in Tommy Wildfire Rich. No. I never forget that. There was no other discussion about it. He said no. Michael B said different weight classes in wrestling and weight classes as well, and it would help. When you got it, But sometimes sometimes it just happens that a little guy has to wrestle a big guy. It's just part of wrestling. It's just unfortunate that does have to happen. Anything we need to say more about Chief Wahoo McDaniel before we go?
Yeah,
that was Andy McDaniel's favorite wrestler of all time. We'll know exactly who his number one's going to be when it comes up, and no wonder he was a tremendous draw in the Mid Atlantic for Jim Crockett. And it doesn't matter what time he was there, he did good business.
Well, he finally starts venturing out away from Texas. And on the next, we'll talk about when he makes his way out of Texas and starts going to other territories. And then he really makes a name for himself. Until the next video, on behalf of Jack Lord, Rodney West, make sure you hit that notification bell and watch the video down below. And we're asking you to subscribe. But watch the video down below and then subscribe. Or subscribe first and then watch the video. Whichever way you would like to do it. It doesn't
take
matter.
your pick.
Take your pick. That's right. We'll see you in the next video right here on Pro Wrestling Inside Now.